Part the Seventh, which treats of the Snow Queen's palace and what came to pass therein. The palace walls were formed of driven snow, its doors and windows of the cutting winds. There were above 100 halls, the largest of many, 4 miles in extent, all illuminated by the northern lights, all alike vast, empty, icily cold, dazzling white. No sounds of mirth ever resounded through the dreary spaces. No cheerful scene refreshed the sight, not even so much as a boyar's ball, such as one might imagine sometimes taking place. The tempest forming the band of musicians, the polar bears standing on their hind paws and exhibiting themselves in oddest positions. Nor was there ever a card assembly, or when the cards might be held in the mouth and dealt out by the paws, nor even a small selective coffee party for the young white lady foxes. Vast, empty, and cold were the Snow Queen's chambers, and the northern lights flashed, now high, now low, in regular gradations. In the midst of the empty, interminable snow salon stood a frozen lake. It was frozen and broken into 1,000 pieces, but these pieces so exactly resembled each other that the breaking of them might well be deemed a work of more human skill. The Snow Queen, when at home, always sat in the center of this lake. She used to say that she was sitting on the mirror of reason, and that hers was the best, indeed the only one in the world. Little Kay was quite blue, nay, almost black with cold, but he did not observe it, for the Snow Queen had kissed away the shrinking feeling he used to experience. His heart was like a lump of ice. He was bruised among the sharp, icy fragments, laying and jutting around them in every possible way, just as people do with what are called Chinese puzzles. Kay could form the most curious and complete figures. This was the ice puzzle of reason, and in his eyes these figures were the utmost importance. He often formed whole worlds, but there was one word he could never succeed in forming. It was eternity. The Snow Queen had said to him, "When thou canst put the figure together, thou shalt become thine own master, and I will give thee the whole world, and a new pair of skates." And a new pair of skates. But he could never do it. "Now I am going to the warm countries," said the Snow Queen. "I shall flit through the air and look into the black cauldrons." She meant the burning mountains, Etna and Vesuvius. "I shall whiten them a little. That will be good to the citrons and vineyards." So away flew the Snow Queen, leaving Kay sitting all alone in the large, empty hall of ice. He looked at the fragments and thought till his head ached. He sat so still and so stiff that one might have fancied that he, too, was frozen. Cold and cutting blew the winds when little Gerda passed through the palace gates, but she repeated her evening prayer, and then immediately sank to rest. She entered the large, cold, empty hall. She saw Kay. She recognized him. She flew upon his neck. She held him so fast and cried, "Kay, dear, dear Kay, I've found thee at last!" But he sat still as before, frozen, silent, motionless. His unkindness wounded poor Gerda deeply. Hot and bitter were the tears she shed, but they fell upon his breast. They reached his heart. They thawed the ice and dissolved the tiny splinter of glass within it. He looked at her whilst she sang her hymn. Our roses bloom and fade away. Our infant Lord abides alway. May we be blessed his face to see, and ever little children be. Then Kay burst into tears. He wept till the glass splinter floated in his eye, and fell with his tears. He knew his old companion immediately, and exclaimed with joy, Gerda, my dear little Gerda, where hast thou been all this time? And where have I been? He looked around him. How cold it is here! How wide and empty! And he embraced Gerda, while she laughed and wept turns. Even the pieces of ice took a part in their joy. They danced about merrily, and when they wearied they lay down and formed their own accord the mystical letters which the Snow Queen had said that Kay could put together should he be his own master, and that she would give him the whole world, with a new pair of skates besides. And Gerda kissed his cheeks, whereupon they became fresh, glowing as ever. She kissed his eyes, and they sparkled like her own. She kissed his hands and feet, and he was once more healthy and merry. The Snow Queen might come home as soon as she liked. It mattered not. Kay's charter of freedom stood written in the mirror in the bright, icy characters. They took each other by the hand and wandered forth out of the palace, talking meanwhile about the aged grandmother and the rose trees on the roof of their houses. And they walked on, and the winds were hushed into a calm, and the sun burst forth in splendor from among the dark storm clouds. When they arrived at the bush with the red berries, they found the reindeer standing by, awaiting their arrival. He had brought with him another and younger reindeer, whose udders were full, who gladly gave her warm milk to refresh the young travelers. The old reindeer and the young hen now carried Kay and Gerda on their backs, the first to ride to the hot little room of the wise woman of Finland, where they warmed themselves and received advice on how to proceed in their journey home, and afterwards to the abode of Lapland woman, who made them some clothes and provided them with a sledge. The whole party now ran on together till they came to a boundary of the country, but just where the green leaves began to sprout, the Lapland woman and the two reindeers took their leave. Farewell, farewell, they all said, and the first little birds they had seen for many a long dry day began to chirp and warble their pretty songs, and the trees of the forest burst upon them with rich and various tinted foliage. Suddenly the green boughs parted asunder, and a spirited horse galloped up. Gerda knew it well, for it was the one which she had harnessed to her gold coach, and on it sat the young girl wearing a bright scarlet cap, and with pistols on the holster before her. It was indeed no other than the robber maiden, who, weary of her home in the forest, was going on her travels, first to the north and afterwards to other parts of the world. She at once recognized Gerda, and Gerda had not forgotten her. More joyful was their greeting. A fine gentleman you are, to be sure, you graceless young truants, she said to Kay. I should like to know if you deserved that anyone should come running to the end of the world on your account. But Gerda stroked her cheeks and asked her after the prince and the princess. They have gone traveling into foreign countries, replied the robber maiden. And the raven? Ah, the raven is dead, returned she. The tame beloved has become a widow, and she hops about with a piece of worsted wound in her leg. She moans most piteously, and chatters more than ever. But tell me now how all this has happened to you, and how you managed to pick up your old playfellow. And Gerda and Kay told their story. Snip, snap, sure, bachelor, said the robber maiden. She pressed the hands of both, and promised that if she ever passed under town, she would pay them a visit, and then bade them farewell, and rode away out to the wide world. Kay and Gerda walked hand in hand. Wherever they went it was spring, beautiful spring, and with its bright flowers and green leaves. They arrived at a large town. The church bells were ringing merrily, and they immediately recognized the high towers rising into the sky. It was the town wherein they had lived. Joyfully they passed through the streets. Joyfully they stopped at the door of Gerda's grandmother. They walked up the stairs and entered the well-known room. The clock said tick-tick, and the hands moved as well. Only one alteration could they find, and that was in themselves, for they saw that they were now full-grown persons. The rose trees on the roof blossomed in front of an open window, and there beneath them stood the children's stools. Kay and Gerda went and sat down upon them, still holding each other by the hands. The cold, hollow splendor of the Snow Queen's palace they had forgotten. It seemed to them only the pleasant dream. The grandmother, meanwhile, sat amid God's bright sunlight and read from the Bible these words: "Unless ye become as little children, ye shall not enter to the kingdom of heaven." When Kay and Gerda gazed at each other, they now understood the words of their hymn. Our roses bloom and fade away, our infant Lord abides alway. May we be blessed his face to see, and ever little children be. There they sat, those two happy ones, growing up and yet children. Children at heart, while all around them rode bright summer, warm, glorious summer.